Hello everyone, so in the last video Ludo showed you how to design the water reminder app. Now I'm here to show you how to make it all functional. So as we have here, we have the main screen and the user should be able to add water intakes. The number here should change. Also the user will be able to set goals that they can meet of how much water they have to drink in a day. And also the user will be able to see even a history of the last days and see which days in the last week they hit their goal and which days they're not. Alright, before I start doing anything, let's talk about the setup. So here I have the project here as a local project. So what does that mean is I have the files on my device, not on Nowa Cloud. And in case you build your project online already, you can simply just download the source code, click on open, choose the folder, this one, which is the local Flutter project, and you will have your project locally. What's the benefits of that? Well, I have made already a GitHub integration. It's a normal Flutter project on my device. I can simply integrate Git. So I have here GitHub setup, I have here the project, and I also have even branches that I can use. And what I'm going to do from now on, every feature we built, we're going to comment it. So if anything happened, you can always go back to the last comment and you can also see the changes made in every step. Number two, why do we need a local project? Because we can have an emulator running side by side and we can use hot reload. So let's say if I change anything here in the design, by only saving the change, you will see the simulator getting updated instantly. Okay, so what's the plan now? The first feature we're going to build is that we're going to let users be able to add water to a variable and we're going to update the number. So in this video, we're going to go through a lot of things actually. We're going to go through global state. We're going to see how to use circuit. We're going to also deal with objects and we're going to also deal with custom expressions and also components and variables. So you will have a pretty good idea about a lot of important things in Nowa with this simple feature. So let's start with describing the architecture of the app. So this is going to be the architecture of this feature. So first of all, we're going to create an object called WaterIntakeEntry. And this object will hold a single entry of water that a user will input. It will have the amount and it will have the date. So how much water in milliliter the user did drink at that time and the date of this entry. Now, we're going to create a global state called WaterState. First of all, let's talk about global state. So the global state, the nice thing about it is it's an object that you can access from any screen in the app. You can access the variables inside, you can access even the functions inside. So if you want to make a variable accessible from different screens, or you want to make an object accessible from different screens, you create a global state and you add those things inside this global state. Also, the nice thing here, if you update a number or a variable inside this state, if another screen is listening to that value, it will also automatically get updated. And you don't have to worry about passing the values between the different screens. You can just have one object, which is a global state, to handle all of that, and then managing this will be easy. One example is to store the user data, for example, where it makes sense to make it in a global state because you might need to access the name of the user or it's the information of the user from different screens and you don't have to worry about passing them between screens. Okay, so let's talk about what's inside this object. So we have an integer called today total intake. This will hold the number of how much water did the user drink in that specific day. And it will be an integer. We're going to also have a list of water log entry called today's log. So every time a user drink water, we're going to create an object and we're going to add it to this list. And then we're going to update today total intake. Why is that? Because I don't just want to see the total intake, I also want to see the history of the water the user drink in that day. So I want to see the different times I did drink water and the date of every entry. That's why having the integer alone is not enough. I also need the list. The last thing we need to add is just a function that is called addWaterLog. And with this function, I'm going to pass the amount of water and this function will actually update the variable and will update the list. We're going to see how this will be in action. This is like the main screen. So in the main screen, I will have here the total number of, the total milliliter of the water that a user drank in that day, and this will be taken from the global state. And I have also here 4 carts that a user can add water by clicking on them, and those carts will only call this function, which is add water log, and this function will take care of the rest. So enough with the explanation, let's go implement this thing. Okay, so in Nowa version 2, if you click on this button here, you will see all the files inside your project. You will see here the main files, like the Dart files, the screens, the components, the objects. But underneath you will see the board. So if you have multiple boards, you will see them here, where each board will have, let's say, different screens or components. And then you will see the assets. But next to the lib folder, where your main project files are located, you can then click on plus and then click on new object. And here I will create the object, which is water log entry. So this will be the single entry. Now, you can see here what's going to happen. So it tells you that it will create a class called WaterIntakeEntry. And it will start with a capital letter. This is the practice when a class is created in code. So let's say, even if I call it like a small, like let's say WaterIntakeEntry, it will automatically change it to capital because this is how practice, agreed on with the naming of the classes. So let's go back and just call it WaterIntakeEntry. And I will see also the file that will be created. And as a practice for the file name, it's usually have all small letters and it have underscore instead of a space. So it will tell you now with this object, this is what's going to be created, this file, and inside this file, this will be the class name. Click on submit, and now I have here the object called WaterIntakeEntry. Now inside here in the panel, I can zoom out and look into the code of it. I can here also add variables and stuff, but I can also add stuff on the go. I don't have to open it. So I can simply just come here and click on plus to add a field, and I will call it amount. And the amount here will be integer, which is going to be the single amount. We need also, as we saw, the date. So we will create another object called date, and the type will be date time, which will hold the date of that entry. We're done with that. Great. Now, if we click save, we can see that it was saved. And if we go back to GitHub, we can see the changes. So here, I can see that I create a new file called WaterIntakeEntry. This is the code of the file. So great. Now we don't need to comment anything, but I just wanted to check. Now the next step is to create the global state. So we can go back again to the lib folder, click on new global state. And this will be called WaterState, as we talked about it before. WaterState. And again, the name and the file will be updated. Now, if we click on plus, let's open now the WaterState and we focus on it. We can see here the code if you need to see the code, but you can also deal with everything without dealing with the code. So you can here click on plus and add a new function or a new variable. If you forgot, let's go back to the design. So we said we're going to create an integer called today total intake. Let's do that. So a variable, we're going to call it today water intake, and this will be an integer. And it will have a default value of 0, and it's not final. Why it's not final? Because this number will keep changing. So the assignment will keep changing, so you don't want it to be final. What does final do? If you turn on the final, if you see in the code, it's final, which means that once it's set to 0, you cannot change it. But this is not what we want in this case, so we will turn it off. All right, now going back again, we need a list of water log entry. It's called today's logs. And now let's create a variable called today's logs, and it will be an object. So click on this button to make everything in the list appear as a list. Now we want a list of water log entry. If you don't do that and you click on water log entry, it will create a single object of that type, but you want it to be a list. So now when we choose that, we have a default value that's 0, which means like the list is empty. Now if you look at the code, you can see it. Now we have a list of water log entry, and it's an empty list. And is it final? No. Why? We will see that in the upcoming videos, but because we're going to save this list to the shared pref, so when the user closes the app, we don't lose the data. And when the user opens the app, we need to reset this again. So we will need to reassign this variable, so we don't need to make it final. All right. And then the last thing is we need to add a function called add water log. Great. And the return type is void. This function will not give us anything back. It will just do something, which is adding water to the list. All right, so now what we're gonna do. Now, clicking on edit will open the function in the new circuit. And this is the first time you will see the new circuit in action in Nowa version 2. So a quick explanation of how the circuit works. When you click on plus, you will add nodes. You can have the basic nodes like, for example, setting a variable or navigating or like printing. You have the compound nodes like if statement or try and catch, which will give you like a block that will have nodes inside of it. Think of it exactly as the code when you have a single statement or you have a compound statement. Now, let's talk about this one exactly. So add water log requires a parameter because when we call the function every single time, we need to pass a different amount to be added to the history of what the user did drink in that day, which means this will not be a fixed number. We need to pass different numbers every single time. So to do that, we want to add a parameter called amount. And this parameter will be integer. And then what we need to do is we simply need to do two things. We need to create an object called WaterIntakeEntry, and we add it to the list. So we say the user did drink this amount of water at that specific time. And then we need to update the today water intake to add the new amount to the existing amount. So let's do that. So the first thing is we said we need to create an object. So we can go to general and click on create, or you can simply in the search for create. And then here when you click on create, you will have the list of objects that you can create from. Now I want to create an object from the water log entry, and I want to use here you see the constructors. From JSON, if you have JSON, you want to pass and create the object from the JSON, but we just want the default one. And now we created the object, which is the water log entry, which is this one, if you remember, and we need to pass the amount and we need to pass the date. Now, the amount that this object will hold will be taken from the function. So the function, okay, let's just go back to the steps. If I click on this button here, 100, then this function will call, this button will call the function add water log, and it will pass 100 to the function. Function then will create an object of water log entry with the amount of 100 and the date of that exact moment. This object will be added to the list, and the number of the today total intake will be updated to include the new amount. Go back again. So now the amount of the object will be taken from the parameter. By going to locals, you can see all the local variables you have. And the amount here is the variable which is the parameter of the function. So if I click here, what's going to happen is the amount that will be passed to the function will be used to create this object. Now talking about the date. So this will be the date of when the user did drink that water, and it will be that moment when we created that object. Now we have something called datetime.now, which will create a datetime object, which is the type of that variable, and that will hold the moment, the datetime object that will have the exact time of that moment when the object was created. Now, to do that, we need to go to custom expression, and we need to write the expression here. This is a way to write pure Dart expression. So the same thing you do with code, you can write it here. So I'm going to call the datetime object, and it has a constructor called now. By doing that, you're creating a datetime object, but it will hold the data of that moment exactly. When I click on evaluate, I will say I have no mistake, then it will be connected to the date. When I check, you can just click again on custom expression and you will have it. So now we created an object that have the amount that's passed to the function and the date. Now we need to store the result. We're going to make a variable to hold this object temporary. So we will choose that we want to store this object in a new variable. I'm going to call the name just like water intake. And then what I need to do is I need to add this object to the list. So I have the list called today logs. And when I do that, I can here click on plus next to the name of the list to go deeper and call a function inside that list. So I have two options. I can add and I can insert. Now adding will add the object, let's say, to the end. So let's say if we have already 3 items and I add another one, it will be added as a 4th item. Insert, I will be able to specify exactly where to add the object, so I control the order. Now we will see later, because I need the amount that was added recently to appear on the top of the list, I need to always insert the object in the first of the list. Now we will see this later, but for now we will just choose insert. And with insert we have the option to choose the index, which is where we want the object to be inserted. When you say index 0, meaning that I want the object to be inserted in the beginning of the list, and I need to push everything else to be the second, the third, the fourth object. So I need to insert this in the beginning. Now the value is exactly what is the object that you want to insert. And for me, it's this one, the one I just created. So I can click on value, and then from the locals, I can choose water intake, which is the one that I just created right here. So now I'm inserting this object to the list. Amazing. Now the next step is I want to update the number. So I want today water intake now to include the new amount that was added. So I can do this really easily by using, again, custom expressions. So I need to set today water intake. So I will click on set, which means that I need to give it a new value. And the new value here will not be just like 100 or 200, because if I just put the amount, and if the user drink 100, it will be 100. If the user drink 200, it will be 200. But I don't want that. I want to add the 200 to the previous amounts. So because of this, I cannot put like the amount to be the value. I need to add the amount to the older value. So to do that, I will click on the value and click on custom expression. Now the value will be the same older amount, which is the today water intake, and I will add to it the amount. Now the amount here is the name of the variable that was passed to the function or the function parameter, and this one will hold the older value of the today water intake, which is in the beginning will be 0, but then it will keep increasing. Now evaluate means I have no problem. I can also here see the breakdown of the expression. I'm using plus operator on those two amounts. Great. So now I have this function. Now we did all of that, but in the end I need to do one extra thing. I want to notify that if there's any part of the screen listening to this number, it need to update because this number has changed. So I need to call something called notify listeners, which is exactly as setState in Flutter or refresh in Nowa, but not for a single screen, it's for the full app. So meaning that if there's any screen using any data from this exact global state, then this screen has to update itself to get the new value. If you don't do this, and if you add a new amount, then the today water intake that will be showing in the screen will not get updated. And we will see this in action. So now we're done with the function. Congrats! And now we can even see here the code. So we created this object, we passed the amount, we inserted this object to the beginning of the list, we then updated the today water intake, and in the end, we notified the listeners. All right, now let's go back again to the design. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show the number here. So I want to add the global state to the app. Now I created the object here, but I need to add it to the app still. So to do that, just don't select anything on the board, and then here you'll see something called pick global state. Now we have here already a global state, which is for the theme, and I will just pick another one, which is now the water state. And then the water state now inside the app, so the app can access this global state. So now I want this 1000 milliliter to be taken from the global state. So after I already added the global state here, I can then just select the text And instead of having 1000, which is going to be a fixed number, I want it to be connected to the total today's intake that was created inside the global state. So here I can see the global state, and inside I can see the today water intake, but this is an integer. The problem is, if I choose it, this text expect a string, and this is a number here, the today water intake. So I simply have to choose toString, because this one will convert the number to a text. Now I have it here. So now the thing is, I want to have milliliter next to it. So to do that, again, click on it and click on custom expression. Here you will see the expression that brings the today water intake from the global state. But I don't want it to be only the number. I also will add a plus, and I will add the quotation so I can have a string next to it, and I will add milliliter. If I click on evaluate, then I will see that this number will be taken from the global state, and then I have milliliter next to it. Now I can also see that the alignment now is broken, so I can simply fix it by going to the stack. Now this is a stack, so I can simply say that I want this text to be literally, connected to the right and the left side. So I can here say I want to choose the space between the left and the right of this text, and I will actually just make it 0. So this will make the text go all the way, the right and the left, and then I can simply just change the alignment of the text and make it in the middle. It's a very simple trick. Now, by the way, if you click on save, I can also run this app on the emulator. Already choose the iPhone because I have the iPhone here running. So I can click on play. And if I click on play, it will build, and after the build, I will see the app running in the emulator. Okay, now I can also see here the logs, what happened. So I can see here that the Flutter run, the running of the app is actually done. So when I click on the simulator, I can see the app here running. And then if I do any change, it will be updated automatically. Now here I can see it's already on 0. All right, now what I want to do next is I want to add amounts to the total. So when I click on those components, I want to add those amounts to the total today water intake, which is the variable here, to the global state. So I simply need to call the function that I just created, which is the add water log, by clicking on those cards, and I have to pass the amount of each one to that function. Now, before we do that, we need to do one simple modification. So here we have the component that was created. Now, what you can simply do, you can have 4 cards, and every card can call the function, and you can pass different amounts in each one. But if you want more scalable solution, or something that you don't need to worry to pass the correct number every single time, we can do that from the component itself. So here I will do some modifications. Now in the design tutorial, what Ludo did, she created parameters and she passed the number as a string. But I don't want this. I want the number to be as an integer. I can actually pass it to the water state, to the global state, which is the water state. So what I simply need to do now is, so parameter is the 1000 milliliter. This one, I don't want it to be a string. First of all, I want it to be an integer. And this will not be called parameter from now on. It will be called amount, or let's say card amount. So it will be the amount that this card will send. And of course, if you go back here, you will see that there's a problem because now you changed the type and the parameter name, and it's not now matching. So what I need to do is just detach. And now I can here pass a default value, but I don't want to pass a default value. So I will just keep it to 0. But what I want to do now is I want to go to the text. And because parameter now is an integer, as we already saw before, I need to convert it to a string. And using custom expression, I can also still add the milliliter. I can add space in the beginning, so I have space between the milliliter and the string coming from this expression. Click on evaluate, no problem, great, now I have it here. Amazing. So now what do we have? We have the parameter. Okay, now it's called param, but again, I need to change it to, what did we say? We say card amount. All right, amazing. All right, so now we have the component. We changed the parameter to card amount, and we made it integer. So what we need to do right now is to actually, I want to make this card clickable. So what I want to do is to add a wrapper to the component, and I will add GestureDetector. By doing that, I can add functionality of the clicking to the card. Now, by going to onTap, I can modify the function. So now I can see the circuit again. Now what I need to do is I need to call the function, which is this one, which is add water log, and pass the amount to that function. So this function will take care of adding this amount of water to the water state. So to do that, we need to call first the global state. So I have here the water state. Now I can see that this will create the object of, bring the object of the water state. But by clicking on plus, I can dive deeper to something specific inside that water state. So if I click on the plus next to the expression, I can see what's inside. And I want to call the function, which is add water log. Now, by doing that, I can then see the amount, which is a parameter of that function. And the amount, now the good thing that we did is now the amount is actually this one, which is a card amount. So every card will hold a different card amount, and then this card amount will be sent to the function. The nice thing about doing that is that you don't have now to manually worry about passing the right number. You don't have to pass 200 or 300 for every card. So if you have 4 cards, you don't need to do 4 functions where you pass different numbers. Here, you can simply just use the card amount here. So I will just connect the amount by clicking on it. You connect it to the card amount. That's it. That's all you have to do. And then this function will take care of everything. Now, by doing that, we already passed the function here. Now let's go back to the main screen itself. And now we have here the 4 instances from the component, as you already saw in the previous video. Now there's a small problem here that since we changed the parameter type, now we are passing a string to an integer, which is wrong. So now we need to change that. So here I need to just write 200. So I'm passing now 200. And then in the one below, I need to pass 300. And then here I need to pass 400 or 500. Now this only happened because we changed the parameter from string to an integer, but we didn't change that here. So now we're passing a string to an integer, which is wrong. So we had to modify that. Now it's all modified. And now the nice thing is I don't need to add a specific, wait, this one is 0. I have to make it 100. Now the nice thing is I don't need to specify, I need to build different functions to pass this number. I just passed parameter number, which is a card amount, and then inside, because I have the GestureDetector here, it will take that card amount and send it to the water state. So now let's actually see this in action. We can, by the way, click on play, and you can see the app. Now if you click on this, I can see now the number is changing by 100. Here I'm adding 200, here I'm adding 300, and here I'm adding 500. Amazing. Now we are done with the first feature. Now in the next video we have a lot of things to do. First of all, we're going to make the bottom navigation bar works. We can also add the dialogues to plus, so you can add a custom number. We will also make users able to set specific goal and also calculate the remaining, and we also will change the animation here, the progress bar, to show how close are you to hit the goal. And also we will see how we can save the number, so when you close the app and you open it again, it remembers the amount that you have. Plus you will see the history of the water you drink in that day and the previous days. And lastly, we will set notifications that it can remind you every 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours to drink water. So now we have it running inside, but let's say when I run to the emulator, we just can click on hot restart, and then in the emulator now we can see it now works. Amazing. So now let's continue for the next video.